Bob was very happy in his little blob of see-through jelly languishing contented at the bottom of the pond. He didn't have a worry as he lay there on his tummy, because he was a little comma half a centimetre long. He was of course some frog spawn, and he lived with all the other frog spawn made by Mummy Frog at the beginning of the spring. But Bob was a philosopher's spawn, thinking from the day he was born, what was life about, what would the coming seasons bring? Time sped by, and Bob grew too big for his little blob of jelly, so like all the other tadpoles, Bob broke out the egg. His new environment, though wetter and a little bit more smelly, was more stimulating for Bob than his jelly bed. He wriggled and he giggled while the other tadpoles wriggled. There was much more to investigate and so much more to see. Bobby started making theses on the lifestyle of the species, and how would they evolve, and if they did, what would they be? Time went ever rolling on, and other tadpoles one by one were taken by the fish or simply couldn't stand the strain, until the population of the pond reached maturation and the ecobalance situation evened out again. Then Bob began to wonder why he had this funny feeling underneath his little tummy, so he asked the wise old frog. She said, "There's no disguising it, you are metamorphosizing, soon you'll grow some little legs." And Bobby listened all agog. This got our Bob thinking. He was happy as a tadpole drinking pond water and swimming with the others every day. He didn't want to change and have his body rearranged. Bob decided he would fight the force of nature all the way.
"I am happy as a tadpole,"
he cried.
"Anyway, I have decided I don't want to be a frog and face the great outdoors. I want to stay at home and swarm with all the others keeping warm,"
he cried, delighted with his speech, expecting wild applause. But all the other tadpoles stared. No tadpole in the past had dared to question that they changed and left the pond for somewhere new. That was simply how it was, and they began to boo at Bob because he represented basically anarchic points of view. There was uproar in the pond that night, and Bob was caught. After a fight, the powers of the pond that be would not let Bobby go. He was thinking far too deep. They didn't want this sort of thing to creep down to the lower orders. It would wreck the status quo. Bob was hauled before the king frog, regal on his royal log, carried by the sycophantic amphibian court. The big fat king said,
"Bob, you've got to stop this sort of thing. You have to knuckle down and do the kind of things we think you ought."
But Bobby, still rebellious and still undaunted by the fuss, puffed his little tadpole body up to twice its size, cleared his throat discreetly, and instead of bowing meekly shouted,
"No!"
and stared the big king bullfrog fully in the eyes.
Throw him in the slammer,"
cried the king frog with a stammer.
"I have never heard such arrogance in all my froggy years."
And Bob was dragged away, and as he left he heard the king frog say,
"You must make an example of him, terrify his peers."
Bobby was locked in the stocks and taunted by the passing frogs, humiliated hourly till he hung his head in shame, and all across the pond the word went out that he was wrong, so that even if he got out Bob would have to change his name. But unbeknown to Bobby, there had grown a little lobby of admirers of our hero in his anti-social fight. They formed a small rescue committee, thinking it was such a pity Bob would be locked up because he had exercised his rights. In the dead of night they snuck into the jail, and to their luck they found the guards were sleeping, so they loosened Bobby's bonds. Then all of them, quite rapidly, swam off together happily, and hid among the reed beds on the borders of the pond. But even Bobby couldn't fight the force of Mother Nature, so of course eventually he changed into a frog himself. And once this change occurred, Bob decided he preferred to leave this autocratic pond behind and go find somewhere else. After hopping hard for many days, he came across a pond that in a lot of ways seemed suitable, and so he jumped right in. His followers all followed suit, and Bobby climbed onto a root and cried,
"Now I'm the king!"
And so it all began again.